We are in the private room near the junk dealer again, and I am getting ready to record the next section of my audiobook based on this game. I've got 24 pieces of interview data to read, but I've also got some memory chips, and I might have a look at some of this. Actually, I've got to hand them in, and I haven't. I'll do that later. How have I forgotten to do this? Yeah, we'll get to it. Anyway, I've got 2 memory chips I've got to hand in, but I got plenty of the interview data to read. It should be highlighted, the ones I haven't read. There we go. There's no more from Dead Man or from Die Hard Man, but we got a few from Heart Man. I've read this one, right? Yes, I have. Okay, let's start with the Evo Devo unit. From Hartman at Hartman's lab a year ago. It seems a rather significant breakthrough has been achieved back at headquarters. They've successfully integrated an Evo Devo unit into a chiral printer. In case you're not familiar with the term, an Evo Devo unit refers to an evolutionary development in biology. Your genes, mouse genes, dinosaur genes, the genes of every living creature are virtually identical, and yet we develop into such radically different organisms. Thus, a question arises. Why did such disparate life arrive from the self-same building blocks? Evo Devo was the field of study that sought to solve that mystery, to lay bare the secrets of evolution. Before the advent of Evo Devo, which is a silly word to say, it's got to be said, that's... Evo Devo sounds like a Australian nickname for someone. It was thought that in order to reconstruct a dinosaur, we would require samples of its DNA. However, thanks to this technology's ability to extrapolate from existing data, we could, with the correct stimulus, grow a dinosaur from the DNA of any living organism. We could, in essence, recreate the process by which dinosaurs evolved from primeval life forms. An Evo Devo unit applies these same principles to the problem of information and object reconstruction. With the help of the chiral network, we may take incomplete data, and indeed incomplete objects, and reproduce their complete forms. This data can be fed into a chiral printer, and voila! Partial delivery yields finished product. Partial data yields finished product. The tech isn't viable for everyday use just yet, but when it is, it will be of incalculable benefit to our research, and bring our reconstruction efforts forwards by a matter of decades. Okay. I'm not familiar enough with the, makeup of DNA, but to know if this is complete nonsense or not. But it seems, I don't know. There is a lot of similarity between DNA, but they're not identical. I know that, we share, 90% of our DNA with chickens or whatever. I've heard that somewhere. The Higgs particle. Higgs Monaghan, why yes, I know the name, the former leader of a private courier organization, as I recall, which served a large region of the West, and was instrumental in providing continued support to the people living there. But as we were so far apart, bridges struggled to maintain any measure of influence over their operations. It probably didn't help that the separatist movement has always enjoyed strong support in that territory. In the wake of growing violence by the demons, we were shocked to learn that Higgs himself was at their head. What to make of this strange development? Why on earth would a man who once commanded a group devoted to American Reconstructionism suddenly pledge himself to the cause of American destruction? His name only compounds the insult. Have you heard of the Higgs particle, also known as the God particle, by people who are not physicists, because physicists hate that? It's associated with the Higgs field, which gives all other particles their mass. Without it, atoms would fly apart and matter would not exist as we know it. In other words, its very presence prevents mindless destruction. Cosmic irony indeed. Ooh, this is a long one. Chiral clouds and timefall. Why do chiral clouds form? Why does timefall occur? And why does it herald the manifestation of BTs? These are questions we still struggle to answer. As we know, BTs are formed from something akin to antimatter. Their first appearance coincided with the Death Stranding. Prior to that point, it is believed that there was very little in the way of antimatter present in our world at all. But we've since learned that this was far from the case, for even before the Stranding, antimatter was all around us. I discovered a scientific paper on the subject titled On Antimatter and Clouds. According to the paper, gamma radiation generated by the lightning strikes can trigger the formation of positrons, and indeed, particles of antimatter can be detected inside regular rain clouds. The mechanism by which they are formed is not fully understood, but the mere existence of this phenomenon is enough to suggest something intriguing. Chiral clouds contain chiralium, yes? Well, what would happen if gamma radiation were to act upon them in the same way as it does in regular clouds? Could chiralium excited by gamma radiation exacerbate minute distortions in spacetime, somehow loosening the seams that connect us with our beaches? And if so, when the excited chiralium mixes with the timefall and descends to the ground below, could the entire region beneath the clouds become much more strongly connected with the beach as a result? This could explain why BTs appear in areas prone to timefall. Furthermore, if the antimatter we previously thought did not exist in any measurable quantity on Earth were in fact present in such commonplace phenomena as the very clouds above us, would this not lend credence to the theory that BTs, beaches, and the world of the dead, all these things may have existed long before the Stranding? Too much of a theoretical leap? Perhaps. I do not deny that our world changed, drastically and irrevocably. Nevertheless, could it not be that the Death Stranding was merely the clap of thunder that brought this great change to our attention, and not the change itself? So, I am gathering that the beach is like an anti-universe. I don't know if it's antimatter specifically. Is it true that antimatter exists within clouds? Probably not like anti-atoms. We're not talking like full... maybe in like very small quark-level particles. Like positrons, for instance. But if it were full matter, I mean, it would just... you would notice it, because there would be massive nuclear explosions, or at the very least, you would get annihilations. Actually, I have no idea what I'm talking about. Why am I speculating? I know nothing about antimatter, or whether or not that's even the case. But, so far as I understand it, anti-atoms, like anti-hydrogen, doesn't exist in any series. No, not antimatter as matter. Maybe particles, individual particles, might hang around in certain elements, but they don't exist in, like, atom-sized quantities. Repatriates and void-outs. I have come across a number of old reports which make mention of humans who have certain powers which have led them to becoming known as repatriates. As we know, when a human and a BT come into contact, a void-out results, which is analogous to what a physicist would term an annihilation event. These events occur when matter meets antimatter, and mass is converted violently and abruptly into energy. The process is highly efficient, though some energy is lost to the production of neutrinos. Similarly, in a void-out, vast amounts of energy are released, resulting in destruction on a devastating scale which leaves behind a large crater. Void-outs triggered by contact with repatriates, however, consistently result in smaller craters. It is suspected that this is because the energy is lost to the beach, in the same manner that it is lost to neutrino production in a conventional annihilation event. And that is the case of repatriates. The amount of energy lost is particularly high. That said, how the repatriate's body survives intact is a far bigger mystery, and one on which I will refrain from commenting until I have had the chance to examine one in the flesh. One notable repatriate is Sam Strand, a former member of Bridges, who One notable repatriate is Sam Strand, a former member of Bridges 1, who left some years ago, and has been making his way in the world as a porter ever since. I do hope I get to meet him someday, which he has, considering how invaluable he could be in advancing our understanding of the true nature of beaches and the Death Stranding. Yeah, repatriates come back. This has only happened once in the game, and that was right at the beginning, where we were caught in the void out near Central Knot City. But it's... the way I saw it then, the BB had something to do with our coming back, because that's what we saw right before coming back to life. And then we returned from the beach. There's a connection, I think, between repatriates and the beach. But I'll let the game explain to me what exactly that is, or what it means. Alright. Another long one, okay. King Midas and the Chiral Crystals. Rumors have been circulating regarding a man who calls himself King Midas. Okay, this is a person. I might meet King Midas at some point. Unlike his namesake from Greek mythology, however, this gentleman does not turn all that he touches into gold. Instead, he claims to wield the power to create chiral crystals at will, so it's a, pretty descriptive name for him. It is gold-like. I mean, it certainly looks goldish. Chiralium. The story suggests that he gained this power as a result of experiments involving organisms which possess a similar ability. I am, of course, aware of the existence of microbes that could melt and condense gold, in effect extracting it from ore deposits, but this is the first I have heard of any organism that can do something similar with chiralium. These organisms are apparently akin to cryptobiotes, as well as the coral that is found in the seam, in that they exist outside of time. If this man truly managed to harvest such organisms, then it is an extraordinary achievement which could lead to untold possibilities. Veritable bioalchemy, even. Much like his mythical counterpart, however, King Midas is said to have paid a heavy price for his power. Indeed, his body has turned into a mass of particles, a side effect of crystallizing all the chiralium with which he came into contact. He has said that the only evidence of his existence are 2 golden handprints that he left behind. Now, I must temper this rather dramatic story by stressing that no microbes capable of the previously described ability have ever been detected. As such, I suspect the king is nothing more than an urban legend, the kind of story spun by dreamers in a world where chiral crystals are rare and precious, and can only be collected from perilous timefall-soaked places. Perhaps we could even call it a morality tale, the moral being, of course, that greed is never good, and whether one lusts for gold or for chiral crystals. It is, however, a remarkable coincidence that not long after I first heard talk of this modern-day King Midas, I also started to hear rumours concerning a man wearing a golden death mask. Might the two be related? Who knows? Who's wearing the golden death mask? Was Higgs's mask gold? I'm trying to remember. I think it might have been. Higgs and... maybe Higgs came into contact with King Midas? Maybe they're working together. I don't think they're the same person, though. Maybe at some point Higgs met King Midas and, absorbed him by wearing his mask. Okay, so the chiral network, this is, Mama. The chiral network 1, which I've already read. Now the chiral network 2. At Central Knot City. I haven't been reading out, some of the side missions, but you can see it. Central Knot City, 3 years ago before the first expedition's departure. In a way, the chiral network makes use of the beach to allow us to travel through time. See, sending large amounts of data takes large amounts of time as you'd expect, but the thing about beaches is, well, time doesn't pass the same way in them as it does out here. Might not even pass at all. Think about how light from the stars in the sky we see was produced thousands and thousands of years ago. Routing data through the beach is like jumping to a point earlier in that journey, thereby cutting it shorter. Much shorter. Just imagine massive amounts of data transferred almost instantaneously. That's what we're trying to achieve with the chiral network in a nutshell. In theory, the network allows us to reconstruct old data that would otherwise have been lost, and to do so with fragmented resources. Using what's known as Evo-Devo analysis, we could take the finger bone of a dinosaur and say extrapolate from that not only the dinosaur's form, but its composition, internal, external, even its thought processes to a degree. Anything's possible with chiral computing. In other words, we won't just be able to reunite a nation, we'll be able to reclaim everything we lost in the Death Stranding. More, even. Theoretically, we could go back as far as the birth of the planet and beyond. And thanks to the beach, we will be able to compile all that data in one place, and reduce the processing time for even the most complex analyses effectively to 0. This is, again, several months ago and at an unknown location. Drones and the Singularity. Yep, the bot is good to go. We put it through some field tests within the network service area and should have the results before long. Delivery efficiency within a given region is expected to improve following a successful Cupid connection as well. No, that won't be a problem. The bot's just a cargo carrier. Human input is required to accept orders and set coordinates. Drone syndrome shouldn't be a factor, and the Singularity, not a chance. Why is human input... Can't you automate the setting of orders quite easily? I mean, you need a programmer for that. Okay, maybe that's human input, but still, I don't think... The way it's having it in this game is I have to actually physically go to a terminal and send one on its way. Well, think about it. AI doesn't die. It might get upgraded or replaced, but that's not at all comparable to death, so it has no reason to fear it, you see? The concept is completely foreign, incomprehensible. Death comes to all living things, but only humans have the capacity to understand the implications, to imagine what it means to no longer exist. That's one limitation. AI won't ever overcome. That's the reason it won't ever surpass human intelligence. It's a weird cutoff, I think. I'm not entirely sure I buy it, personally. Because surpassing the human experience is one thing, but you could surpass human capacity to learn, to absorb material and spit out an accurate response. And the difference between that and genuine intelligence would get really fuzzy after a while. From Fragile at Lake Knot City 2 years ago. When I was a little girl, my father told me that preppers were people who decided long ago that they couldn't trust their nation to be there for them anymore. The bonds between us had grown weak long before the Death Stranding. We once had a network spanning the whole wide world that could send items from anywhere to anywhere and connect anyone with anything. But still we were isolated. Still we were alone. Some liked it that way, and even wanted more. They wanted walls along their borders, wanted to turn away refugees and outsiders. Some even wanted new nations all their own. They began to see the state as an enemy of their freedom, not a protector of it. The ones most far gone, they didn't trust the country to defend them if something went really wrong. War, terrorism, natural disaster, you name it. So they built shelters and stocked full of supplies in preparation for the worst. And then the worst happened, the Death Stranding. America ceased to exist. Their shelters became their homes, where they would live and where they would die. But while they'd prepared, they hadn't prepared to live there forever, which is why they wound up relying on us couriers so heavily. My father and I didn't want to go back to the old America. We didn't want a country that had pushed people apart. We wanted one that brought them together, that allowed them to support one another. And that was what we tried to work towards. You see, there's a cultural thing here, and I have to, remind myself that this is a game written by someone who is not American, is specifically Japanese. And Japan's got a far more collectivist ideology, collectivist culture. America, particularly, has been founded on a sense of individualism, of people look out for themselves, and the government's sort of there to protect individuals' ability to enjoy liberty. That's the idea. That was the founding idea of America. Whether or not America has failed or succeeded in that goal is one for constant debate. Whereas in Japan, and in a lot of countries, not just Japan, in a culture like Japan, the idea that people should give up liberties and coalesce to benefit society, and basically the tide raises all ships, rather than focus on your individual liberties, is much stronger than it is in countries like the United States and like Australia. So I'm used to a more individualistic nature. I am very much myself a proponent of individualism, and whilst I am not a libertarian, I do believe that there should be stringent limits on how much the state can interfere with individual person liberties and private property and things like that. The people, especially the more individualist amongst us, may find it not unreasonable to see the state as the enemy of freedom. And the further along you go with that mind, the more you see the state as that leviathan that commands society, reducing the individualist property for the benefit of society, or, if you're more cynical, the benefit of the elites, then the idea of the state as a protector of it is one that's difficult to what's referred to in political science as negative freedoms, by the difference between negative and positive freedom. Negative freedom is the freedom from government intervention. Positive freedom is the freedom to live the life the way you want to live it. One of which positive freedom requires more state intervention. The freedom from state intervention may result in you being oppressed by another force. Corporations, local powers, things like, if you go far enough, you might even see things like warlords and the like. The freedom to achieve, to pursue your goals and your dreams and all of that requires the state to basically, actively get its hand into the forces of society to make sure that everyone gets an equal or fair footing, as some might see it. And that does mean the people in charge of making those decisions on what levers need to be pulled have an exorbitant amount of power. It's an interesting sort of cultural clash here, is all I'm saying. Okay. Fragile's father and Fragile Express. From Fragile a year ago in Lake Knot. My father came up with the name Fragile Express before I was born. You probably, I imagine he was called Fragile as well. No, actually, I have no idea. She might have taken her name. As I say, people take their names from their jobs, so she might have just called herself Fragile because she was working at Fragile Express. Anyway, the US was Swiss cheese back then. All the void outs had left craters as far as the eye could see. People were losing their minds, looking for a way out. They thought the government would have their back, but it was gone. All the systems, all the gears that kept the world turning, smashed to bits in a matter of seconds. When everything you know breaks, it's hard not to break yourself. Before our new network, there was an old one. The whole nation was online 24/7. Cameras and microphones were everywhere, watching, listening, and recording. There was a strange sort of comfort in that, people said. A certainty that someone, somewhere, would know if you were in trouble. Yeah, and there was a lot of people, including myself, who think that a surveillance state isn't exactly... That's a very positive view on a surveillance state, that's all I'm saying. Like I said, sort of a cultural clash there. But after the Death Stranding, all that vanished into the ether. No one was looking out anymore. No one was coming to save you. A lot of folks died waiting before the rest caught on and took matters into their own hands. My father was one of the latter. He had been working for a private logistics company, and he and his friends figured that they were in a position to bring some supplies and repair vital infrastructure Americans used to rely on to survive. They were builders. Men and women who understood the value of what was lost and wanted to reclaim it. My father and them really believed that they could get it all back, bit by bit, and make us whole, make us America. It was a precious, fragile dream, like so much back then, but if they nurtured it, if they stayed true, he knew it could all be ours again. People, ideas, connections, all so fragile. The USA was nothing more than a network of people and the connections between them. No wonder it broke apart so easily. But everything that's worth something is fragile. That's why I was given this name. My father is not with us anymore, but the bond between us remains, fragile though it is. Everything that is worth something is fragile. I mean, as good a reason as any to name a company after something. Alright, now we're up to Bridges' staff. The lake at Ground Zero. Port Knot City, from Victor, 2.5 years ago. When I first laid eyes on the lake here at Ground Zero, I was blown away by the sheer size of it. I never imagined anything could be so huge. This was just after the Death Stranding, and not many people had seen the craters up close yet. Back when I was still living with my parents and my brother on the East Coast, an explosion like nothing the world had ever seen before tore a gaping hole in the heart of America. There were all kinds of rumors floating around at the time. That it was a meteor, that it was a nuke dropped by another country. I was just a kid, but I could tell the adults didn't have a clue, so you can imagine how I felt. And then we found out there had been other explosions, not just here in America, but the world over. By the time we learned they were void outs, and what void outs were, the country was pretty much done. But hey, that was then, this is now, and things are looking up. I just got told my kid brother's still alive. Yeah, whoops. That's, I rather threw a spanner in that particular work. Word is he's heading up corpse disposal team in Capital Knot City. handled his shit well enough to get picked for the second expedition. 3 more years, and he'll be out here with me. Sorry, died on my account. Can't wait to see him again. I feel bad. Victor. Oxytocin. Victor, 2.5 years ago at Port Knot City. Back before the Death Stranding, people didn't rely on smart drugs like oxytocin so much, probably because they weren't so damn isolated. Me and my brother Igor, we got separated from our folks after the first void out. Shit was crazy, and I was just a kid, but he was even younger, too young to have to go through all that. Spending night after night holed up in those ruins, it was rough. But we had each other, held each other close to stay warm, and it does make things better. Docs would tell you that Oxy is doing its own thing, the hormone, the body. Docs would tell you that's Oxy doing its thing. The hormone releases when we touch each other. It's why mothers form bonds with their kids when they hold them and other stuff like that. But with the comms network, not what they were, it's more dangerous than ever to go outside. And even when you got other people around, they don't seem too keen to make physical contact. A collective aversion due to an ingrained fear of BTs and void outs, also I've been told. Add it all up and you got yourself a people that's isolated, scattered, stressed out, and insecure. So we've got no choice but to supplement our oxy levels. Fill the void left by physical affection with chemical TLC. Pretty fucked up, am I right? I know we used to go to war over race, religion, and all that back in the day, but that had to be better than living like this. I mean, yeah. Requiring basically a supplement for human interaction is what oxytocin is. It's better than death. I'm not sure it's better than, like, a world war, but still. It's not brilliant. Prepper interview, the engineer. I've got a lot of prepper interviews to go through. The engineer 2 years ago at his personal shelter. My horizons ain't exactly broad. That said, I'm not completely cut off from the outside world. I knew what Bridges was, and that they were trying to rebuild America. But when you're living down here, it's hard to see how that's got anything to do with you and yourself, right? My folks holed up in this shelter after the Death Stranding, had a kid, and raised him in their slice of paradise. And together we lived off whatever Fragile Express was kind enough to bring our way. They told me tales about the good old days, but I never had much of an imagination. Couldn't see how a country long gone was any concern of mine. As far as I figured, if Fragile Express was happy to keep bringing us stuff, we didn't need anyone else, and we certainly didn't need America. Whatever that even was. But then one day I was looking for a part of this machine my dad put together. He was an engineer too, and noticed something. It said, "Made in the USA," right there in tiny print. Got me to thinking that America might not exist anymore, but the stuff Americans built is still around, making our lives a little bit easier, even now. You could say the old country lives on its works, kind of like how my folks live on in me. They, died a while back. Anyway, if they were American, I guess that makes me an American too, and maybe this shelter a part of it all. Once I realized that, I started pouring my heart into building stuff that would help you guys put the country back together. In fairness, sometimes when things are made in America, that's a little misleading. There's a lot of ways, like, sometimes it means that, sometimes, made in this and that country. It's often, like, the raw materials are from some other part of the world. It was, the individual components were assembled in a factory in, like, China or Europe or whatever. And then it was, like, finally assembled in an American factory. By immigrants, probably. But that's, neither here nor there. Terrorist posing as Fragile Express couriers. This is from the Craftsman, 1 year ago in his personal shelter. The terrorists have been at it again lately. You heard, right? About how they've been sneaking in and out of cities disguised as Fragile Express couriers. We'll have another disaster on our hands at this rate, but it's not like we can just cut them out. We need Fragile's people to keep doing what they're doing. We rely on those guys for a lot. Though maybe we shouldn't. I hear they're transporting weapons now. Why they'd be so stupid, I can't imagine. Spreading shit around that kills in a world where the dead are ticking to BT bombs. Sure, terrorists are a threat, and mules are a royal pain in the ass. But what genius figured escalation was the way to go when we all know where it leads? We need weapons. No, tools. That can take down the bad guys without killing them. Which is why he invented the bowler gun. And we need the hardware in circulation gone yesterday. We can't keep folks from dying in accidents or getting sick. We can't keep them from dying, period. But the deaths we can put off, we ought to. Violence isn't just ugly, it's damn near suicidal in this day and age. Which is why I'm looking to make a bunch of less than lethal gear in the hopes that it'll prevent a few idiots from getting themselves and others killed. Prepper interview the Timefall farmers. The Timefall farmer, 1 year ago, were at the Timefall farmer's farm. Me, I used to be an ecologist. Amelie thought highly of me and my wife's research into Timefall's effects on plant life. Wife, there we go, that's the relationship. She was the one who suggested that it could be used to boost agricultural production. See, Timefall's radically altered the ecosystem of the entire continent. Obviously, I know, just as it's obvious, we're powerless to stop it. So we had the idea of trying to use it to our advantage instead, make the environment better, not worse. Easier said than done, though. Take void-out craters, for example. Local chiral density is generally higher in their vicinity, which correlates with increased timefall. With all that exposure, you'd think they'd turn lush and green again before you'd know it. Unfortunately, it doesn't quite pan out that way. Nothing grows in any of them. Might be the timefall's done something to the soil, but the truth is, I don't have a clue. Which is one of the reasons why me and the missus were conducting our research. Gotta say for the record that it hadn't crossed our minds that the timefall could be used to help grow food. That idea was all Amelie, so credit where credit's due. That was Amelie's idea. Yeah, I would have presumed it was pretty obvious that you could use timefall to... If timefall aged stuff, surely it would accelerate growth rates. That seems fairly like a decision that a ecologist would come to pretty quickly, but there it is. Prepper interviewed the junk dealer at his personal shelter 6 months ago. Incredible, isn't it? This hourglass. See how the sand flows upwards. Ah, okay, it's a Corellium hourglass, and it flows upwards. Fair enough. Got chiral particles in it, that's why it moves like that. And look at the shape of the glass. So elegant, so delicate. Just like the girl who made it. Hard to believe who is his girlfriend, not his daughter, for God's sakes. I still feel weird about getting that wrong. Made the whole sequence a little bit awkward, but, you know. Hard to believe it's even of this world, but it was made by human hands. Crazy, isn't it? No wonder everyone in South Knot City knows her work. You can imagine how I felt when she gave it to me. I guess you could say it was a thank you present. She asked me to fix something for her. And this is what I got in return. You know, I've done jobs for all kinds over the years, but none of the other customers ever did anything like this for me. The most will just toss you up a couple likes, and that's the end of it. Don't get me wrong, there's nothing wrong with a like or two, it's just, this was different. The moment she gave me this hourglass, I knew I wanted to be with her. Never happened, though. Ain't cut out for love and relationships, don't have what it takes. Other people kind of scare me, to be honest. Still, even if we can't be together, at least I'll have this hourglass. Seems he got over his, misanthropy. The Elder. America of the past, 2 years ago at his personal shelter. Oh boy, you want to hear about America? Well, you asked for it. But if you're looking for some rose-tinted bullshit, you've come to the wrong place. I was an immigrant, you see. Nothing special about that. The whole country was built by immigrants. Yeah, you guys might want to remember that, by the way. As might my country might want to remember that we were built by immigrants. But they tend to forget that when they get all nativist. Right off the bat, I could see it wasn't quite the land of the free I'd been led to believe. But for a while there, it wasn't so bad. I even bought into the American dream for a minute. I might add words that sort of clear up the sentence for me. I mean, hell, they let a black guy and a woman take a shot at the presidency, you know. Yeah, it took them long enough, but there it is. It didn't last, though. Somewhere along the line, people became so damned intolerant. All of a sudden, there wasn't any room for any other opinions, or other people for that matter. We even elected a guy right before the Death Stranding that wanted to build a wall along the whole border, stop anyone like me from coming in. Once that talk started up, I reckon that was that. How could I expect a goddamn thing from a country that didn't want me? How could I hope to get by in land where the weak and needy got fucked over for profit and peace of mind? So yeah, I figured holing up in a shelter was the way to go. Didn't know how bad things would get, no one did, but I'll tell you, if it hadn't been for that single decision, I wouldn't be talking to you right now. Just goes to show that the only person anyone can trust, can rely on, is his own damn self. UCA, give me a break. You're pushing the same old bullshit repackaged for a brave new world. Yeah. The political polarization in a lot of countries, not just the United States, I wouldn't necessarily... I've never been of the illusion that just because the Trump presidency happened and Trumpism became so difficult in America, and you know, the increasing just complete distrust of any kind of compromise from both sides of the political aisle, but particularly from the right. Like, there is a certain blame in the current crop of favoring extremist ideology that should go to the left, but the majority of the problems have been created by the right. But ultimately, this has happened before. You know, far-right movements, far-left movements, all of these crop up and die down again because they're just not sustainable. You can't sustain extremist ideologies. Once you get a period of emergency, you get a period of crisis, and the rhetoric gets jumped up into the next year, and the extremists come out of the woodwork. But eventually things calm down again, and so long as the moderates are able to have any influence, the position will always move towards the moderate region, because ultimately that's the only way you get progress, is by moderation. Because the far right will never agree to any moron ideas from the far left, and the far left will never countenance the abjectly evil views of the far right. So the only recourse between the extremes is violence. But in countries that have institutions and mechanisms that favor political moderation and compromise, like democracies, like the Western democracies, the United States, the extreme views tend to bleed out as the more moderate members of the political extremes begin to sort of see the value in pushing their cause through the legitimate means. And this is what's always happened, is that these ideas have generally died down. So why I don't doom over things like Trump, because the morons and the extremists can only fly in the face of the realities of politics for so long. And as long as the moderates don't get complacent and lose control of the messaging, then public opinion will almost always shift away from the extremes. It's not a guarantee, but a lot of people need to be reminded that that is the case. Journal number 1, who unknown, where unknown, and when writing year unknown. Today, I made a delivery to a shelter near Middle Knot City. It was my longest trip to date and a new personal best. Back when I was starting out, people tried to warn me off the life, saying it was dangerous for prepper youngins to make runs, and that no one would ever really trust me. But what was I supposed to do? Kids without parents need to eat too, and it's not like I had any skills. 2 arms, 2 legs, and a whole lot of grit, that's all I had to offer. Worked out okay so far. I bring people what they need, and in return they do right by me. The more deliveries I make, the more orders I get. Never a porter around when you need one, so long as you don't fuck up too badly. Someone ought to throw you a bone. Helps that I've got a 6th sense for BTs too, pretty rare. It's probably one of the reasons I get so much work. So he's got dooms as well. Whoever this unknown person is. Sometimes people praise me, tell me I'm doing society a service by helping my fellow man. Can't say that factors into it. I'd sooner keep to myself if I could, but I've got to survive somehow, and I sure as hell ain't gonna manage by myself. Another prepper's kicked the bucket. Went to deliver his medicine as usual this morning, but I guess I was pretty damn late. Poor guy wasn't just dead, but on the verge of going necro. Wasn't no time to take him to an incinerator, so I had to dump him in nearby BT territory. Better than leaving him to pop. Especially since my own shelter is close by. Gotta look out for number 1. When I dumped him, just before he popped, it was like I could feel the BTs reacting to his corpse. Saw the beach too, strangest thing, but I'd felt it before, when I first disposed of someone. The sensation was stronger this time, though, no doubt about it. I don't know if this means I've got dooms, but I'm starting to think there's something special about me. I think you've definitely got some level of dooms. It is a scale. It is a sliding scale. It's not like you've either got it or you don't. You've got levels of it. As Fragile's made very clear. Delivery outfit out west heard tell of my BT sensing abilities and has expressed interest in bringing me on board. Seems they could operate outside Bridge's sphere of influence, and they want to leverage my experience and know how to expand their operations. Could be interesting. It's funny, I started making runs out of necessity to stay alive, but that's all change. I'm an altruist now. I live to help other people. Preppers around these parts rely on me. Hell, they wouldn't last 5 minutes without me. What would my daddy say if he could see me now, He taught me man's his own keeper, but here I am, part of a community, working with other people, bringing the world together. Daddy always told me that the wide, wide world was dangerous, and we had to stay in our shelter and spend our whole life there, die there. Well, fuck that. Community is what it's all about. Buddy of mine died today. He was out in the mountains on a delivery, and it was so goddamn foggy, I guess he just lost sight of the trail. He called me asking for help, but then the line went dead. I saw the void out from here. Nearly blinded me. I guess he wandered into BT territory. There's not many of us porters left these days. Not many you could trust to get the job done anyway. Folks quitting or dying, going mule. Attrition's a bitch. If we're to keep on, we're going to need better equipment and someone else who can track BTs. I can still manage sometimes, but my power's getting weaker. I can feel it. Just wish I knew what to do, because at this rate I'm fucked. We all are. So it wears off. It'll slowly degrade over time. I wonder if that's important, or if I need to consider that, or if, like, later on in the game I'm not going to be able to sense BTs as well, or if I'm going to get stronger. Might go the other way around for some people. And other. Starting with The Counselor, 3 years ago at Bridges HQ, called An Asexual World. Very long one. Record suggests that the widespread aversion towards physical contact and intimacy was a phenomenon that has been observed even before the Death Stranding. Now that is a very Japanese statement, considering the current fertility rates in Japan have been dropping like a stone, that they've had to introduce, like, they've had to basically say, look, you really need to start getting together. One contemporary report, for example, details the increasing popularity of the sexless lifestyle among young people. A growing percentage of the younger cohort were self-identifying as asexual, claiming to be incapable of feeling desire or attraction. Accordingly, such individuals were less likely to have children or engage in sexual activity. Okay. Interesting. I wonder what this is going to say. Now, I haven't actually mentioned this outright, though I think I've hinted to it on several occasions. I'm one of these people. Although I don't know if I'd call it a self-identification. It's a matter of fact that I don't experience sexual attraction. I'm not necessarily mad about what this is kind of implying. Well, we'll see what it says. It should be noted, however, that many other unique sexual identities were being recognized during this period, such as demisexuals who are incapable of sexual attraction without emotional connection, and panromantics who profess an attraction unrestricted by sex or gender, albeit one that is not necessarily sexual in nature. Oh, that's quite a lot. One theory posits that the Stranding accelerated the proliferation of these sexualities. In a terrifying new world in which BTs roam and annihilation is an everyday occurrence, people have grown reticent to form an emotional connection to others. Although there has been no measurable decrease in human fertility, the birth rate has nevertheless dropped dramatically. Incidents of sexual harassment and assault have also seen a sharp decrease, which seems to suggest that sex could not be further from our minds, for better or worse. I must preempt myself by admitting that I do not have any empirical data with which to support the following claim. That said, it is my contention that based on the aforementioned observations and others, the vast majority of the population could be characterized as asexual. Flag for archival review, article advances a controversial theory which widely regarded as unsubstantiated and discriminatory. Prevailing theory suggests that increased identification of aforementioned sexualities is increased due to social awareness and acceptance. Historic records indicate that individuals asserting identities and falling outside of cisgender heteronormativity face significant discrimination and persecution, leading to suppression and concealment as survival strategies. It is generally accepted that a variety of factors contributed to reduced sexual activity and birth rate pre- and post-death stranding. Studies are ongoing. Okay, so they do flag it at the bottom there. I'm sure someone I'm sure this came up as someone was writing and would come up with an idea. Oh, here's might be an example of why, for instance, non-heterosexual identities are starting to pop up all over the world. And I imagine someone was like, this seems a little like you're dismissing the realities of non-heteronormative identities. I mean, for my own part, I've known that I was asexual since I was a teenager, and it wasn't necessarily once I learned about it, I was able to call myself it, but I never had any illusions. I just sort of what a lot of my friends are going through or experiencing or are quite obvious just isn't occurring for me. Just a lot of thought process that appear to go through a lot of my friends' minds doesn't go through mine. I never gave it much thought until quite a bit later in life. Fragile's umbrella and suit. You think that Fragile is you think that thing Fragile carries is an umbrella? Well, not exactly. It does look a bit weird. This is from a Fragile Express staffer 2 years ago in South Knot City, by the way. But I didn't think it was actually an umbrella for the purpose. But she does use it as an umbrella. In the fight with Higgs, she's holding it above her head in the Timefall, so I don't think it's an unreasonable conclusion to come to. I can see why you jumped to that conclusion, what with the shape and all, but you're wrong. If it's any consolation, I thought it was an umbrella too at first. It's actually some kind of navigational device that Fragile came up with herself. Well, she does drop it off so we can do her Fragile jump. I won't pretend to understand the theory behind it, but I'm told it factors chiral density across beaches and plots coordinates for her jumps. It definitely plays some kind of role. What about the suit? Fragile's got some kind of dooms that lets her move from beach to beach. The way she tells it, she kind of clears her mind and lets her powers do the rest. Maybe it's something similar with the spikes on her suit. When Fragile senses Corellium concentrations, they pop out. I'm not sure she'd be able to tell otherwise. It's like an unconscious reaction. The spikes only retract when chiral density decreases. Ah. And when she travels between the beach, the chiral density around her increases, and she has a sort of subconscious response that the suit can detect, but she can't really identify herself. And so when the spikes pop out, I feel like there's better ways to note yourself that, to tell, but the spikes do look cool. Who knows? Names and theories are just ways of coping with things we don't really understand. Same with visual indications of the intangible, maybe. All I can say is that Fragile's umbrella and spikes seem to help her hone her powers. Help her hone her powers, that's a fun one. Alright. That's everything. I've gone through it all. Alright, awesome. There's a lot of reading. But apart from the memory chips, and I'll probably get more interviews from that, I'm glad I'm going through all this. It is just a lot of text in this game. I have mail. Another one from Jay. I think I'll read the mail in proper episodes. That seems like a reasonable thing to do. But yeah, there's all my interview data. I'm now up to date. When I get my next 20, I'll do another supplemental. It took longer this time, but then again, I had 4 more than I did last time. I had 20 before, now I had 24. So yeah, that was fun. Anyway, enough bollocksing around with supplementals. Let's get back to the proper videos.